So U.S. officials are planning to head to Pakistan for a new round of peace talks, but Iran is reportedly refusing to come to the table.
Yeah, this comes as Tehran vows retaliation after the U.S. seized one of their ships on the Strait of Hormuz.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us from Tel Aviv with the latest. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight, CENTCOM announced that U.S. forces seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship that was attempting to breach the naval blockade. President Trump announced the seizure on Truth Social, saying the Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. Right now, U.S. Marines have custody of the vessel. The ship remains in U.S. custody. Here's what it sounded like when the guided missile destroyer USS Spruance warned the cargo ship before firing.
Vessel Tosca, Lower Vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
At least 24 other vessels were turned around over the weekend, complying with U.S. orders. The incident came 24 hours after Iran's IRGC fired on 2 vessels trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz in violation of the ceasefire. Now the question remains if a broader agreement will be reached this week. The ceasefire is set to expire in less than 48 hours. I spoke with President Trump over the weekend, who told me if the deal isn't done, the deal that we made, then I'm going to take out their bridges and their power plants. He went on to say if they don't sign this thing, the whole country is going to get blown up. Now, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson held a press conference today saying the Iranians have not yet agreed to attend the negotiating table tomorrow in Islamabad, Pakistan. He said they are reviewing American proposals. Guys?
It's hard for me to believe, Trey, that they're going to say this and not show up at the bargaining table and not think the ceasefire is over and the war will resume.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the Iranian messaging is totally disconnected. We heard late last week from Iran's foreign minister saying the Strait of Hormuz is open. And then just hours later, IRGC vessels were firing on ships trying to pass through this critical waterway. And it gives you a sense of just how disconnected the Iranians are. At the negotiating table, though, we're looking at 3 separate things. One has to do with the enriched uranium that is buried deep underground. The second has to do with the Strait of Hormuz. And the third with the support of regional proxies like Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah. The Iranians are looking for any excuse to say they won't participate in these talks. But the president has drawn a very strong red line in the sand, saying that if they do not sign on the dotted line, this war is going to resume, and he is going to target this critical infrastructure inside of Iran. So the Iranians have a decision to make right now. Do they attend the peace talks in Islamabad tomorrow and make a good faith deal, or does the war resume?
You know, I was reading about how we took over that ship. There were repeated warnings, Trey, as you have said. They violated the blockade, and they had instructions as we played to leave the engine room so that nobody would die. We ended up firing a 5-inch MK-45 gun into their engine room and blew it up. Then we saw the U.S. Marines from a helicopter go down on top of their vessel, and we warned them about this. So now we have overtaken their vessel. What happens now? I assume our Marines are safe. You told us that in the first hour, the ones who went on their vessel. What about the men on board their vessel, the Iranians, and what happens to their vessel?
It's a great question. And the president to pass the blockade. This is a very simple blockade. Iranian ports are closed in this area as a result of the Iranian threat against U.S. forces and their inability to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. And so as it relates to this vessel, it will remain in U.S. custody, we are told by U.S. Central Command. But we know up to 24 other vessels over the weekend actually adhered to the U.S. warnings and turned around and went back to port or close to the shoreline. Moving forward, this is going to be a critical area to watch because the Iranians are testing U.S. forces in the region, and they are testing this very fragile ceasefire that is set to expire in less than 2 days. If the war does resume, we can expect more strikes against the IRGC and what is left of their Navy. We know more than 150 Iranian Navy vessels are currently resting at the bottom of the sea as a result of those U.S. and Israeli strikes during Operation Epic Fury. But they still have these smaller vessels that they can use to try to disrupt international shipping. The reality here, the Iranians do not have leverage at the negotiating table. They're trying to project strength, but they are disconnected internally, and their foreign minister and president are saying one thing while IRGC commanders are saying something else. And so these critical hours ahead are going to be important to watch for 2 reasons. One, to see if they try to cause any additional problems in the Strait of Hormuz, and 2, to see if they actually show up to the negotiating table tomorrow. We know that top U.S. officials will be there in Islamabad waiting to see if the Iranians are willing to sign this deal. And the president was clear, if they do not sign this agreement, he is going to hit their power plants and their bridges.
So, Trey, real quickly, the Pakistanis, who the president seems to have some respect for, they've been hosting these negotiations. But I was surprised when I heard that the Pakistani president, as well as one of the
praised Pakistan for their role in these negotiations. They understand that at this point, given the fact that so many of these Gulf countries that traditionally are mediators in international conflicts, such as the Qataris, aren't involved in this. And that's because they were taking direct incoming Iranian fire during Operation Epic Fury. And a few weeks ago, the president said he was most surprised by this, the fact that mediators like the Qataris were taking drone and missile fire from the Iranians. So the onus has rested on Pakistan to find a solution here. And you even had officials from Islamabad fly to Tehran late last week to send a direct message in person to the Iranian delegation that this is the last chance. And so the president has praised Pakistan publicly and privately as it relates to their role in these negotiations. And they will be this key intermediary in the hours ahead to try to get the Iranians to the table to see if this deal can move forward.
And then we're going to see the price of oil obviously fluctuate, judging by the promise from these meetings. And last thing, how much pressure do you think is on Vice President Vance to produce something?
I think the pressure is really on the Iranians. That's the sense that I gather from not only administration officials in Washington, but also from Israeli officials here. They say this rests on Iran to make a decision because the president is once again extending an olive branch, an off-ramp. And he's been quite clear in terms of what happens next if they do not sign on the dotted line. And so the pressure is largely on the Iranians to get their act together, figure out who can actually make the decision to sign this agreement, and admit defeat on the battlefield, that the enriched uranium can never stay in their country, that they can't continue with a nuclear program toward a weapon that could be used against U.S. forces or allies across the Middle East.
It's Monday, May 4th, 2026, and the top headlines from Fox News and its affiliates focus heavily on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and domestic economic shifts. International and national security, Project Freedom. President Trump announced a new initiative to guide stranded merchant ships safely through the Strait of Hormuz following Iranian interference. The U.S. has signaled it will escort vessels if necessary. Iran diplomacy. The president confirmed he is reviewing a new Iranian proposal intended to end the current war, though he noted the U.S. is prepared to strike very hard if a deal is not reached. UK shipping alert. Reports emerged of a cargo ship being attacked in the Hormuz Strait, further escalating regional tensions. Economy and business.